Future. We're Manon and Robert. We are from Canada, from the greater region of Montreal. My experience sailing goes back to 2005 to 2008 when we sailed with our kids on a catamaran for 3 years.
Okay, my name is Robert, and I was born on the north shore of the St. Lawrence in Quebec. My sailing experience goes back to my childhood. My father had a day sailor, a 16-foot day sailor with a small dinghy, so I grew up with that, and that got me, let's say, dreaming about maybe some future adventures. What also inspired me was reading a book on the stories of Shackleton. And that awakened my imagination, and I certainly wanted to experience more sailing throughout our lives. So
we loved every minute of our first adventure, but we knew that if we renew the process, we'd change some things with the choice of the next catamaran.
So we wanted a boat that was more performance-oriented, that still had comfort, but we could sail in lighter winds with less engines. I think that was important for us. We liked the idea of dagger boards, for sailing upwind, and also the ability of having good visibility on all of the sails and good access to all of the lines and the winches. So forward cockpit was of interest to us. Barrow Newman was one of my favorite architects, naval architects. So that played an important role in our selection and trusting the boat. When this boat came up for sale, it's quite a radically different boat than anything on the market. It was such a new design, several new concepts on the boat that initially I didn't talk to her about it. Then after a few days, I just reflected on it, and I started liking the concept more and more. We knew that, this was the boat we wanted, and we know from experience that once you find the boat that you want, you better act on it, because waiting is often not a good option. We decided to go all in and buy this boat.
We took delivery of the boat in December 2022. It was the first time we stepped on our boat when we arrived, and right away we felt part of a big family.
We left our working careers, in Canada, and then 4 days later, we're walking up and touching our new boat. That was very special for us, to experience that. And I think, as Manon said, we felt very welcomed by the Windillo Group. And for us, buying a boat in France, I think Manon was very keen on that because of the high level of knowledge that there is in France. And everybody we met sails, and they're probably more competent sailors than we are. But it's great to they when they build a boat, they know how it needs to be done and what needs to go into it, because they think like sailors.
When we took delivery in Canet in December, we definitely had a general sailing plan but we didn't have any precise dates as to where we needed to be by what time. What we knew is that we wanted to take our time to learn the boat because this boat is so drastically different than what we had before.
So, for the first few months, we knew we wanted to sail just the two of us. So we learned to work as a team on the new boat. And we learned all the technical aspects of the boat. We tried to keep the sailing quite simple. It's quite easy to put up sails. It's easy to bring them down when there's no wind. But if the wind does pick up, which often does, it's something we have to gradually learn how to secure the boat, how to reef the boat, and without getting in trouble. And that is what we focused on for the first, say, 4 or 5 months, I'd say. Before we added complexity, we kept things fairly simple.
We did 10,000 nautical miles. We had an initial general plan, which we did not follow. We left Canet, went to the Canaries, and then we went to Cap Verde. From Cap Verde, we went to Barbados, and from Barbados, we did a couple of the islands, and that's where the plan changed.
And the sailing went really well. Honestly, the sailing went well. And once we got to Puerto Rico, Manon said, well, I never went to Bermuda. And, so very spontaneously we said, okay, let's go to Bermuda. And once we got to Bermuda, the sailing had gone so well and we were ahead on our schedule. And, we just said, well, let's go back to Europe. And we decided to cross again and head back to the Azores and, Portugal and Spain again and back in France. So, the boat really allowed us to, it put us in a decision in a position where we could decide to go back to Europe.
What we realized during our crossings is that the fact that the cockpit is basically inside the boat where we live, we can do 5, 6, 7 days crossing without any fatigue.
So, I think one of the big features of this boat for us is the proximity of the cockpit, the fact that, even though we're never separated really, and one can be resting here on the day bed or the night bed here, and the other is taking a shift fully protected from the environment, from the wind, from the rain, and full access to all the lines and winches. So what we discovered, as Manon said, is that we could do a 10-day crossing and feel fairly refreshed at the end of that crossing.
How the crossing went is we typically did maneuvers in the morning, of course adjusted in the day if need be, but the fact that we are so close to each other and there's this proximity and this enclosure, if there was minor or minute adjustments that needed to happen in the middle of the night, I was not worried at all. Even if the intent was to learn the boat as we go, take our time, because of the ease of use of that boat, it didn't take time before we felt much, much more comfortable pushing the boat a little more, racing every time there was a boat close by or even far.
Yeah, so I think, we were, especially, after the second crossing there, we were feeling, fairly good about the boat. We were feeling that we could do basically all the right maneuvers, all the right sail changes. Reefing became quite easy, and we could push the boat. And as the architect initially designed it, we were often sailing 10 to 12, 13, 14 knots. pushing the boat and feeling very comfortable with that. One of the aspects that we were very impressed with was the quality of construction, the rigidity of the hull, the way the cabinets and the windows were assembled to that hull, and what that translates into is during navigation in rough seas, you don't hear any cracking, you don't hear any noises inside the boat.
Although we bought a different boat and we knew what we were getting, we still had that same state of mind that we had with the previous boat. So like everybody else, we bought jerry cans, we filled them with diesel, and we were ready to cross the Atlantic. But what happened is, again, completely different, and we had to live it to really, really understand it. What happened is that at the other end, in Martinique, we had to donate our diesel because we didn't use a single drop.
And I think what's important to, there's two things to diesel. One, it can be used to move the boat forward, which we didn't use at all during the crossing, but also to generate the power. We're very comfortable. We've got electrical stove and fridges and hot water heaters, water makers, all of the instruments. They consume a lot of power, and with the tools provided on this boat, the solar panels and the regeneration, it allowed us to not use one drop of diesel to generate our own power. Regarding the electrical drives, I had been following the technology. I'd been interested in the technology ever since 2002, and studying the various attempts to create these electrical drives. We were very, secured by the Windallow approach, which seemed to deliver a very robust system, a simple system with a high level of reliability. And I'd have to say that we have had no issues. We were very satisfied with the power of the engines, and the reliability of the engines.
It also adds a lot of comfort. The fact that it's so silent in our approach when we have no wind at all and we want to progress a little, it is even a pleasure.
One of the great features of the electrical drives is the regeneration, and we really learned to appreciate that. It's an important supplement to the energy in order to be able to maintain our battery levels throughout let's say a long crossing. And as an example, when we arrived in Bermuda or the Azores at the end of our crossing, we arrived there with 85% battery charge, ready to motor if we needed to.
During our crossings, we never started the genset because over the regeneration, we have a full rooftop of solar cells that does complement our energy needs. People always compare a catamaran or a boat to a house, when in fact it's much, much more complex than that. In my mind, it's much closer to a city than a home, because you do produce your own electricity and you have to be fully independent.
This is the second time we purchased a new boat, and we know from experience that there are always adjustments to be made on a boat. And what is important to us is to be dealing directly with the factory, with the Windallow team, not a third party, and how the relationship that we have with the team, how we can remotely diagnose issues and resolve them quickly during our travels.
now that we're back exactly where we started, we're often asked, what's next? Well, of course, the plan is very general, but the intent is to exit the Med in the early spring and go to the northern countries.
And I think what we can say, considering the qualities of this boat, there is no limit as to where we can go with it.